Marketing operations is the backbone of revenue generation, bridging the gap between marketing efforts and sales outcomes. By streamlining processes, prioritizing key conversion points, and eliminating inefficiencies, you create a seamless journey that maximizes every lead's potential to convert into revenue. Operational excellence ensures that every campaign contributes directly to measurable business growth with greater efficiency and meaningful impact. That's a quote from Sarah Lane-Hawn, marketing ops expert and founder of Lane-Hawn Consulting. Also a sneak peek of our episode today. Welcome to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast where business leaders turn for actionable strategies to fuel growth and drive results. I'm your host, Carrie Curran, and with over 20 years of marketing agency experience driving client business growth, I now run RBMA Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors, where we help businesses like yours effectively scale revenue growth. Visit revenuebasedmarketing.com or connect with me on LinkedIn today. In today's episode, maximizing marketing impact from funnel conversion to revenue attribution, I am joined by the brilliant Sarah Lane-Hawn. She's the founder of Lane-Hawn Consulting and a fractional marketing operations and go-to-market strategy expert. She's also a mathematician turned marketing strategist. Sarah shares her journey from creating blog content to leading marketing operations at startups and scale-ups, bringing her unique perspective to the challenges and opportunities in B2B marketing today. We discuss actionable strategies to optimize funnel conversion, eliminate inefficiencies, and implement reliable revenue attribution models. Sarah also introduces her innovative Goldilocks Model for revenue attribution, a practical, cost-effective solution for startups and scale-ups to measure and maximize marketing's impact. So if your marketing team is struggling to demonstrate revenue impact, this episode is for you. Let's go. So welcome, Sarah. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background and expertise.
Sure. So I'm Sarah Lane-Hawn. I'm a marketing ops senior consultant, and I started my own consultancy just this year. So for the last decade plus, I've been working in-house at multiple startups and scale-ups, assisting both in marketing teams and then leaning over the last 5 years into marketing operations leadership at the executive level. So that's where I come from. Before that, degree was in mathematics. So it's always a fun fact to drop that I am a mathematician who loves marketing. And I'm not alone in that. I feel like I've met so many people who actually have that cross of creative and analytical genius that are in our marketing space.
Well, it's perfect. I mean, there's so much need for data. So we definitely need more mathematicians to help us measure everything. But great. So, Sarah and I met at HubSpot's Inbound conference, and I really loved hearing about kind of her journey with marketing operations, but also the more, we're digging into just all aspects of driving revenue through marketing, through awareness, campaigns, engagement, all the way to conversion. Also the challenges, especially in the B2B space, when it's a very considered purchase, has a much longer buying cycle, much more complex buying journey. And depending on the stats you read, it's either, your buyer may only be in market 5% of the time. So how do you get their attention? And that other 95% of the time, which could be a 3-year cycle, depending again on the investment that your product or service requires. So, I think about especially if it's something that is a contract that you only have one of, that's going to take a lot longer than a B2B tech that's an add-on. So it only reiterates the importance of having really strong marketing operations to measure everything. So Sarah, talk about kind of how you kind of take this approach and make sure that we're able to measure the impact, and why it's so you're so passionate about it.
Yeah. So, from a B2B perspective, I feel like I landed in this place very organically and
Mhm.
absolutely love it because of the complexity,
Yeah.
because you have to consider not only the buyer, but the company, the economic position, the quarter that it is, and if there's budget, right? There's so much that goes in to
Mhm.
marketing into a B2B sales cycle. And so yeah, to your point, like when I very first started in marketing, I was in charge of blog content. And so I was putting out content into the world in a place where there was never going to be somebody who clicked through and that's what they
Purchase
made
right
the purchase
away.
on, right? Like it wasn't going to happen.
Mhm.
Um, and that's fine. I understood vaguely, 12 years plus ago
Mhm.
that that wasn't the purpose, that it was for
Touch
trust and
point and
authority and
yeah.
right awareness. But what was really important to me then was to understand where could I have the most impact, right?
Right.
These things were necessary. They were best practice to have out into the world.
Mhm.
But then what happened after that? And so following through that sales cycle from the buyer's perspective and from our company perspective allowed me to start to see like where are there areas of inefficiency. And I think for me, that's the biggest part of
Mhm.
operations and what we do is fixing inefficiencies,
Yeah.
because if you're only getting that chance 5% of the time,
Mhm.
it better work,
Yeah.
right? Like when they do come around, first brand already has to have been there so they come
Yeah.
around. And then when they do, there shouldn't be anything that
Right.
interrupts it that's avoidable. And so for me, it's very much finding what are all of those avoidable things that we've ran into where it's, you know, very non-personalized, personalized automated emails that rub people the wrong way, or
Right.
forms that are asking you to fill out information you've already given 3 times to the brand. Like
Mhm.
all of these pieces and parts that could make for a subpar brand experience becomes really important in B2B
Yeah.
because it's not a $5 thing that I'm willing to go through the pain because it's cheap. I got another 10% off coupon. I'm going to, take an
Right.
extra 5 minutes and it's fine. No, like this is a huge decision.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a huge part of where I come from on this.
Well, and it's a huge decision to your point, but also marketing budgets we all know have gotten tighter and tighter. And I keep hearing B2B companies saying, well, I'm just going to hire more salespeople. But you're
Right.
like, which always, makes me cringe because to your point, they have to have heard of you, they have to have trust, and they have to engage with you. And just getting them into the pipeline, that's not the end of the story. So I know you talk a lot about kind of optimizing the external and internal journey and being a big part of the goal of your operation. So talk a bit kind of how you approach that and why that's so important.
Yeah, for me, being a numbers person, right?
Okay.
One of my first kind of just experiments in operations was to look at conversion rates from
Mhm.
different things, from individual email and how many people clicked through, but also from our marketing qualified leads and how many of those actually went to the next step of being sales qualified. And when I looked at those rates, I very quickly realized that instead of putting my effort and intention as one person, right,
Mhm.
into can I get a couple more clicks on an email versus can I get a couple more conversion points up between our marketing qualification and sales qualification process, where I chose to put that emphasis
Mhm.
would result in more revenue down the line. And so for me, it became a necessity out of limited headcount, which is
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about, and being
Mhm.
able to say, I only have so much time in a day. Where
Yeah.
should I be focusing? Should I be doing more? Should I be putting my time into testing and making this actual campaign so like a little bit better at a time? Or do I need to focus operationally on how we qualify, how we do lead handoff? And so until those things are lovely, those down funnel conversion points are always going to end up making the biggest impact on your revenue because they're closer to affecting revenue, right?
Right.
So that's how it started, was just kind of having that realization. And so now with all of my clients, that's the number one thing that I push is like, we need to know exactly what our conversion rate is from step to step in the funnel. We need to use that side by side with quantity to play with those levers of like, it's great that we want more, but do we want more because our quality is really low and we're just running through them?
Yeah.
Or do we want more because we've really maximized that we know that if we get them here, we've got it. And so we can amp up quantity and it turn into really good revenue. So that's, a primary need for every B2B company, I think, can do better when it comes to their actual conversion analysis.
Yeah, definitely. Because again, the more you can kind of fine tune and optimize, the more quickly, ideally, you can get them through that whole funnel or process to become your paying customers. So it's definitely there's a timing factor that you want to improve as well.
Right.
So that's great. So I know you talked about you kind of follow the people and kind of knowing where they're coming in, and how do you measure that? How do you set brands up to be able to kind of really get those data points?
Yeah, it depends on what we're trying to measure. And I think one of the main failures that a lot of company has is that they know they want to measure things. They know that that's smart and we should do data back to marketing and sales. And but we don't know exactly what we want to measure yet. And we don't know then how we're going to measure it, even if we figure out what we want to measure. And so for me, it always starts with the basics. Like we need to be able to tag when somebody converts to milestones and have a clear definition of them. We need to look at quantity of that and the conversion rate to the next stage of the marketing and sales funnel, right? And then once we have that layer, we can get into, it's a lot easier to get channel specific metrics and know if something's working from just an initiative perspective. We put it out in the world. Is it being engaged with? Fantastic. We can get those channel by channel metrics pretty well. I think where things get really sticky is what questions executive leadership wants to really ask for the whole of the go-to-market org. And those conversations are sometimes really fun because especially at like the C-suite, I feel like talking with CEOs, they do know what they want. They do know the type of business problem they're trying to answer, and they can articulate it. And then you have to interpret it, and you have to change it into, here's the available data, here's when it's available, here's actually the 5 sub-questions underneath your question that we have to now root out and figure out what matters most to us. But you can usually get there. But I think coming for me, and this is why I work with startups and scale-ups too, is because like if I can work directly with that executive team, we can get to what is actually going to be a business meaningful metric versus working within our own marketing bubble, creating a ton of KPIs that we think are helpful because they are for our decision making, but it doesn't inform the business at large on what needs to be done. So that could be everything from, setting up true revenue attribution, where you're saying this is how much came in this quarter, put it in divided into buckets, of our primary channels. That could be helpful to the executive team, but not necessarily something that is a marketer I'm going to use that knowledge as much. But it also may be something as simple as like, hey, we're trying to optimize our event budget because we're having great success and we know we're having great success, but how far can we push it and continue to see the return this way. And having to unpack, like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
How long of a tail are we going to put on this report to say that is a year from now, we're still going to give it some credit because they did attend a year ago?
Yeah.
Or does it decay over time based on how much influence there is? So,
Yeah.
not necessarily specific reports, but
Yep.
it, having that theory behind it of what are we actually trying to answer and what are we going to do with this? Or are we just
Yeah.
making really pretty charts that,
Well,
we
right.
like?
And I think to make sure that what you are tracking, going back to what the CEO might want to see in the report, is that a vanity metric, or is that really something that's driving the business? But I love the point you made about, you can, like, collecting enough information on the touch points that you can go back and apply or divide the revenue by channel, so that, it's all about having better data to make smarter decisions. And, when do I invest more in, paid media? Do I invest more in conferences?
Right.
But I get the kind of, how long do you measure that lead, and give effort to? Because to a point, especially in B2B, it could be a year before they're ready to convert, but that I guess as we're coming, all of the touch points, and keeping them engaged is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of the things I loved you talked about was identifying the friction points of, like, where they might drop off from, the relationship, and you lose that prospect. Talk about how you kind of identify that and how you help optimize to reduce that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways. And I think from a marketing perspective, a lot of marketers, I think, are just really organically empathetic and they can put themselves in their customers' shoes really
Mhm.
easily. And so I think taking that kind of human based approach is really valuable, and walking through the journeys, all of the possible kind of iterations to understand, like, well, the people who come through this way, like, this is difficult. I
Yeah.
had to look to figure out if I was a fit when it should be obvious, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think from, you know, so for everything kind of in your tech space and digital marketing, like that value of just having a human perspective,
Yeah.
and going with what feels targeted and easy and best, like there's a lot of value to that, even without metrics behind it, just good digital design.
Yeah.
The other part of it is, from a metrics perspective, I think comes into play a lot, when you're looking at just page conversion rates, form conversion rates, and then timeline between steps.
Uh-huh.
If we're having people fall off who seemed really interested, and then all of a sudden they're not, trying to figure out what happened during that time frame. Another area where I see high friction is in business development. So when you're doing outbounding, or
Uh-huh.
even responding to inbound leads, like, how much are you capturing and continuing a relationship?
Yeah. Yep.
If the person's already interested in the brand, they're already engaged to some degree, and now you're pivoting into a human to human relationship.
Mhm.
Um, are we burning bridges? Are we actually turning people off from the brand based on how we're engaging with them? Do we
Right.
sound tone deaf because
Uh-huh.
we should already know why they're interested in our brand
Right.
because of how they've engaged with us, but because operationally marketing isn't informing sales of
Right.
what
Right.
the person was engaged with, now sales sounds like, they just didn't care, when
Right.
that's not always true. Like, it
Yeah.
could just be they didn't have the data in a way that they could say, great, this person seems to fall into this category. This seems to
Mhm.
be the right product fit. This seems to be the topics and pain points they're interested in. I'm going to take those assumptions and run with them
Yeah.
instead of
Yep.
having to ask all of these discovery questions cold and sound like we as a brand don't
Mhm.
know you.
Yeah.
So a lot of veins in which a lot of that can be played. But some of it's as simple as open and click rate, and response rate
Yeah.
metrics.
Yeah.
A lot of it doesn't need to be hyper complex to understand what's working and what isn't. It's more taking the human experience element
Yeah.
and comparing it then to what you have numbers on or where you have a gut feeling. I can't remember who said it. And it's becoming more widely known, but that like your gut instinct is data, because it's built off of your years of experience and knowing things and seeing
Yeah.
things work and not work. And so
Mhm.
using that gut data to say,
Yeah.
this is what I think is wrong.
Yeah.
And then you go numerically test it. You do an A/B split test, you figure out if you were right or wrong. Like that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the numbers can come second. They don't always have to be the
Yeah.
thing that tells us to go take action. A lot of times we need to take action
Yeah.
strategically, intentionally, and then check ourselves to
Yeah.
make sure we didn't make a faux pas.
This episode of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, is brought to you by Kriglu. Want to boost customer acquisition while saving time and money? Meet Kriglu, an AI-powered omnichannel bid management platform designed to optimize your ad spend. Kriglu intelligently adjusts bids across channels, ensuring your ads reach the right audience at the lowest cost. Plus, with its automation, you'll free up valuable time to focus on your business. The result? Efficient, cost-effective growth, all while maximizing your marketing budget. Ready to scale smarter and faster? Visit Kriglu.com, Kriglo.com, and start saving today. That's so smart, and you bring up so many good points, and I think it just reiterates the need for strong communication between marketing and sales as well, and that it can't be siloed. And to have that kind of tracking in place as well, so that you can track what pages did they come from, what did they download, or what did they click on in the email. Having that kind of tech tracking set up, I love that, and I think too it's training your, if you have a BDR, SDR that's following up on those, like the training and the time it goes into to make sure they're using that data to connect, and
Right.
the more personalization you can add to those conversations, and you said it many times, the relationship building I think is so important, especially
Right.
for B2B.
Well, and that's the point of marketing operations, right? Is like we're here to optimize for all of
Yeah.
the things that can possibly be automated or at least processes improved to be a minimal lift so that people can take the time they need to do the things that only humans can do. And so for me in like the BD space, I operationally am not going to be able to replace the human element of you doing research and getting to know this human and build an actual relationship and reach out in unique, creative ways. Like that is where I want your time. I want to be able to tell you not only what people have been looking at, but depending on the company, I might be able to narrow and say, this seems like this kind of persona fit for us. This is probably their pain point. This is probably the information based on their company, what I think we're going to end up selling to them. This, like, I can give you basically a prediction of what I think is going to work and then have snippets already prepared. So you can go in and you're just like, well, marketing is saying these three things are already true. So I drop those in. Here's one that it doesn't seem like we know yet. So I can either do something generic or I can go do research, right? But then the majority of the time is in the meaningful research and, relational development and going deep, multiple layers in an org. And instead of having to go scroll through your HubSpot activity history and go, they're downloading some things and it looks
Yeah.
like they attended a webinar. They clicked on one of our emails. So I guess they like us. Like they don't
What did they fill
have,
out in that form? Let me go find
yeah,
the form like
to
that.
take away that guesswork and
Yeah.
that effort of trying to
Uh-huh.
interpret all of that information every time, and just go ahead and automate saying, hey, if somebody's interested in these type of articles, probably have this type of pain point. If
Yeah.
these people are responding to these type of drip campaigns, it's because we've already identified that this is the type of product fit for them. Like,
Right.
go ahead where you can and make that, assumption for your sales team, and then
Mhm.
they can pivot from there when they need to, but it saves them so much
It
time.
does. Yeah. And it improves, like I always talk about, you want to shorten your sales cycle and improve your close rate. And that's all, like all of this kind of adds into it.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges I do think, though, for we talked a bit about this for anyone in marketing or business development at the decision maker level, is like there are so many tools out there for tracking. We talked about this coming out of HubSpot. Like they're all amazing, and it's like I wish I had this huge budget to apply all of them. I would be so smart, and I probably would just in my sleep it would generate leads for me. But just give us a high level kind of advice on how you evaluate or choose the tools for your tech stack. Just very high level.
Yeah, I mean, for me now, it's very different as a consultant, because usually I'm coming in to an established tech stack and
Hmm.
we're trying to optimize it and just make the most out of something that we're committed to,
Yeah.
or play within the rules, right? And maybe tweak some things here and there. And that's very similar to like starting out in your career, right? Where you don't have any say so about budget. You're just given the tools and you
Yep.
figure it out. But I kind of like that coming full circle for myself personally,
Yeah.
because I like having the constraints, and that makes me be so much more creative and really lean in to figuring out how far can you take some of the software. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
what's a great example of that? Like the amount of things that they released over the last year. If I had a huge tech stack, there's no way I would have leaned in as hard into some of these
Mhm.
new HubSpot features going, oh, well, I already
Yeah.
have this.
Yeah.
Didn't used to exist, exists now. How else can I use this? Right.
Mhm.
So I come at from a very like stingy approach from my history. But even when I had really large marketing budgets, my goal was always, can we make sure that we have a true business need, not a
Mhm.
business want, not people
Yeah.
demanding that we should do this,
Right. Not
but
just
do
a
we,
shiny object with
yeah,
bells and whistles, right?
not a want, but do we
Yes.
actually need the functionality? Like,
Mhm.
is it going to serve our purpose today with our current resources?
Yeah.
And like we mentioned, you and I in a previous conversation, like just because it's a great tool that could do wonderful things doesn't mean that you're at the right stage of a company to take advantage of it.
Right.
And so it may need to sit on your wish list for another year or two until you have a head count where you have somebody who half a day every day can be in this software and adopting it. So I try, like most of my clients have a CRM and a marketing automation platform, a calendaring tool of some sort,
Mhm.
right? And then something that they use for outbound
Yeah.
sequencing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the core. And
Yeah.
then anything beyond that needs to go through the filter of, why are we actually using it?
Yeah.
And is this a temporary need, or is this something that we're scaling a go-to-market initiative around and
Mhm.
actually building programs around using,
Yeah.
so that we understand if we have like dependency on
Yeah.
something as a company, or if it's just an additive tool that
Yeah.
could be great, but isn't necessarily going to be a make or break for the company.
Yeah. And I think, too, just to reiterate the point you made, is that you need to have the resource that can activate on the data or just, use it and there's training, there's some, depending on like the complexity or the, amount of data you're going to be getting, like there might be change management
Yeah.
for the adoption and the use of the data going forward, or the use of the tool. So that needs to be taken into consideration as well. And I find your advice there so valuable, especially as I'm like looking, like I said, looking at the tools coming my way. It's like, these are great, and they will make me smarter, but will they make me smarter in a way that I can actually change my trajectory right now, or is that more next year? So definitely appreciate your advice there, Sarah. One last thing I want to kind of bring up is you talked about, you recently created an attribution platform. Tell us about this.
Yeah. So within HubSpot Pro, I started custom building attribution models for a couple of clients, and I had done this in-house at a couple of places. And I think I got to a point where I really felt like I nailed down what I had been looking for in regards to true revenue attribution for like an executive or a board, where they literally just need the snapshot that says, here's the revenue in the buckets, and it's trustworthy numbers, right? Like that was the goal. And it was really hard for me to just get to the simplicity. And so built a model that works, I think, really well. And so I actually packaged it so that instead of it having to be a custom build every single time, if companies are at a place where it's like, hey, we just want something that we know works, we, have the standard channels that we want to measure that everybody else has, that I can go in and I can onboard that in a matter of weeks. And then, obviously we can customize beyond that, but the goal being like, can I make this more available in a platform where people don't have the funding to go to enterprise level and get attribution, which means they definitely don't have the money to onboard an external tool that's $30,000 to $50,000 a year. Whereas a one-time build where then you own the solution is a lot more palatable, I think, to start up and scale ups. So I'm excited to like have that out in the world and have that be something that people can kind of get their eyes and hands on directly instead of it having to kind of come through and go through a whole custom build.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that you're making it, affordable and within reach. And what is it called and how do people find it?
So I named it the Goldilocks Model. We don't need everything, but we need just enough. And it's on my website, so lanehawnconsulting.com. I've got it on there, and then I also have it on my Linktree, which is Linktree Mopsberry. So either place, people can end up finding it. But yeah, and I'm also hoping like that it serves as a good kind of preview of my work and the way that my brain functions, so that even if people aren't needing attribution, but say somebody's looking for a fractional marketing ops leader or a consultant, like it's a good way for them to kind of vet like, well, who is Sarah? And like, how does she go about these weird elements of marketing, such as revenue attribution, right?
Well, you're applying your mathematical background, which I think is just so valuable to everyone. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, excellent, Sarah. Thank you so much. I definitely have learned so much from you, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. So really appreciate having you on today. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Carrie. Anytime.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. We have more valuable content coming up, so be sure to subscribe to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, so you don't miss out. To connect with me, Carrie Curran, to learn how you can boost your revenue and to listen to past episodes, visit revenuebasedmarketing.com.